Today we are taking a look at Marro, which is Button-Up Box's little sister, and it's designed for your cat. Marro seems to follow in the footsteps of Catkin, which is a popular cat food subscription service. So in this video we are going to take a look at the ingredients, the food, the pros, the cons, and we are of course going to determine whether this is a good or a bad food for your cat and whether you should pay attention to this or not. Now before we start, I want to say that this video is not sponsored by anyone. We are independent and we will always be independent. And I think it's very important because everyone is trying to sell you something. Every single review you watch on the internet seems to be sponsored by the very company that creates the food. So I want to tell you that this video is not sponsored by Marro or anyone whatsoever. Now Marro is yet another subscription service on this occasion for your cat, and in 3 steps they explain that the first thing you need to do is personalize your cat's plan. The second one is they deliver your trial box at a discount. And thirdly, they deliver the food to your door every few weeks. So without any further ado, we are going to take a look at the ingredients and the different recipes they offer your cat and see whether they are good or bad. The first recipe is going to be the succulent chicken. The ingredients are 70% made of human quality chicken, 90%. We then have minerals, cranberries, fructooligosaccharides, mannan oligosaccharides, and psyllium seed. 30% is hydrating gravy, 30% made out of water, tapioca starch, which is a thickening agent, salmon oil, and then brewer's yeast. Now, straight out of the bat, I am going to say to you that I do not like fructooligosaccharides in dog or cat food for that matter. This is an artificial sweetener, and yes, it isn't straight sugar like you see in other cat foods, but I do not like anything that will enhance the flavor in a sugary manner for our cats. Our cats are obligate carnivores and they do not have any dietary requirements for any sugars whatsoever, let alone any artificial sweeteners. Cats lack hepatic glucokinase, so they really struggle converting any sort of starches or sugar into energy. So a cat food with artificial sweetener is not something I like. But hey, maybe by the time you watch this video, they may have changed the recipe onto something a bit more wholesome. The second recipe is tender turkey, and again, we have 70% made of human quality turkey, and then we have minerals, cranberries, fructooligosaccharides, and then the same sort of ingredients as we have for the chicken recipe. We then have hydrating gravy, water, tapioca starch, salmon oil, and brewer's yeast. Again, those are thickening agents, and I am not a massive fan of tapioca starch or brewer's yeast in cat food, but this is something quite prevalent in wet cat foods because they need to be sort of bound together. Otherwise, you would have loose chunks of meat and they wouldn't look as good and gelatinous as regular cat food does. So I do see somewhat the point. Artificial sweetener, however, I don't like that. The other recipes, the pork, the fish, and the beef seem to follow the same sort of ingredients list, and they all seem to include these fructooligosaccharides, which again is better than straight sugar or is better than caramel or caramel coloring that we see sometimes in cat food. However, this is still an artificial sweetener, and we do not want to see any sugar and any sweetener in our cat food. They also seem to claim that Marro is not dry, not wet, and not raw. Marro is fresh, and they say that rather than ultra processing, we gently cook and freeze our meals to lock in the nutrients and inducing aroma. Now, in my opinion, they are using the term fresh in a very loose way. I mean, fresh is fresh, process is process. Anytime you cook something, you alter the food chemically. Even if you gently cook it, even if you cold press it, even if you process it in any way, shape or form with heat, you are going to change the chemical composition of the food. So for them to say that this is fresh food, this is not fresh food. This is cooked food that has then been frozen and gets delivered to your door for you to thaw, similar to raw, but not quite raw. So yes, I do take an issue with the word fresh there, because fresh tends to be associated with raw cat foods, and even though raw cat food is processed somewhat, because even though raw has been already processed, because you need to include the meat, the offal, the bone, the liver, etc., etc., fresh tends to be associated with raw, and this isn't raw. This has been chemically altered, this has been cooked, which, yes, there isn't anything inherently wrong with it, but to say that it's fresh, it isn't fresh. And you will say, well, what are the pros of this food? Well, one has to be the convenience. The convenience in something really, really valuable to some people. So if you are one of those people who wants to forget about buying cat food, you can subscribe to them and you can get a box of cat food delivered every so often, and it will be convenient and your cat will get used to this. The second pro has to do with if you come from a cat food that has rice, wheat, corn, barley, meat and animal derivatives, or straight sugar or syrup, this will be definitely an upgrade. This will be a lot better than a cat food with rice, wheat or barley. Another pro or benefit could be that if you don't like raw cat food, or your cat doesn't take to raw cat food and you cannot bear the thought of handling raw meat in your house, this could be an alternative for you. Now let's look at some cons, shall we? The first one I see is the most obvious one, and is nutritious. The addition of an artificial sweetener in the cat food isn't very good. I don't like it. Let me be very, very honest, and let me be very, very clear. I wouldn't give my cat anything with sugar or any artificial sweeteners. I don't think any sweeteners or any sugar is biologically appropriate for a cat, and I am not a massive fan of these tapioca thickening agents or any starches whatsoever in cat food. Yes, I do understand that sometimes wet cat foods add these thickening agents that are quite starchy, because that's what binds everything together. That's what binds the meat together. That's what keeps everything together. However, my cat, I like him to eat a diet of 100% meat and no wheat, no barley, no fructooligosaccharides, no artificial sweeteners, and no tapioca starch. And that's something that is a preference of mine, and you can be different. The second con I see is that this is more expensive than raw cat food. And even though raw cat food seems to be more biologically appropriate, is a lot less processed, and it hasn't been cooked, these cooked foods, these subscription services tend to rely on convenience more than anything else for you to consider buying them. So if you put this and raw cat food on the same level, they aren't on the same level. Raw cat food is a lot better. It's minimally processed, it hasn't been cooked, and it's a lot more biologically appropriate. It hasn't been chemically altered. And the third con, and this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is that everything in the dog and cat world is now a subscription. And it seems to me that everyone is trying to get you to subscribe to anything, to soap, to toilet roll. We have Netflix, we have YouTube, we have dog food, we have cat food. Everything is a subscription nowadays, and I do believe that sometimes it would be a lot better if you shopped at your independent local pet shop. And yes, I am biased because we own a chain of independent pet shops, but we think it's a lot better for you to develop that rapport and to support your independent pet shop rather than giving your money to a multinational. Also bear in mind what happened with Catkin. They do reserve the right, as of course they are entitled to doing, to change the recipe, and to all of a sudden, because demand outstrips supply, they can change the recipe, and that can have an adverse reaction to your cat. When Catkin was getting bigger and bigger, they changed the way they cooked and they changed the way they made their recipes, and a lot of people were left not very happy, because obviously as companies grow, know they might have to start sourcing ingredients from different places. I don't know this and I cannot foresee the future, so maybe Marro will be different. Now ultimately it's down to you how you want to feed your cat. But if you are really interested about raw cat food and the ranking we have made on the best cat foods on the market here in the UK, I highly encourage you to watch this video and this video next, because they are going to provide you with some of the best education on cat food offered on the internet.